Going on, everybody? What's going on? We are back here live here on the OT Radio Show, and I have a very good show for y'all today. Today, I am bringing on behavior specialist author Lisa Skinner will be joining us here today. Are we going to be talking about her latest book, The Truth and Lies? Whew. Yes, we're going to be talking about autism. It's a secret face, y'all. And she here with us to talk about these kind of things because see, these are the kind of things that are happening in the community that we rarely, very rarely seldom talk about. So we're going to talk to the beautiful author, Miss Lisa Skinner, in a couple of seconds, and we'll be back here live here on the OT Radio Show. And listen, y'all, I can't wait to have conversations with her today. We can talk about some stuff. We'll be back, y'all. Here it goes.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let's
Speak
go.
though, what speak it though. We on the air, we on the air. Just take it there, I'ma take it there. Hold up, hold up, hold up. Yeah, I talk about it, but I'm real about it. I speak on it, but don't catch films about it. We can chop it up like it's nothing, baby. Things that have you.
Ready to have conversation with author Miss Lisa Skinner. How are you? How are you feeling today on this beautiful, might be a little bit chilly, but beautiful day today?
Hi, OT. I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, listen, I am doing better than yesterday. That is my
Oh, that's
favorite
good to
line. I am,
hear.
yes, yes. So tell me a little bit about you.
Okay. I am what we call a behavior specialist with an expertise in Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And there are
Hmm.
actually over 100 brain diseases that cause dementia. A lot of people are not aware of it. Most
Mm-hmm.
people have at least heard about Alzheimer's disease, but
Yes.
there are so many different neurodegenerative diseases that cause the same types of behaviors and symptoms. Alzheimer's disease is just one of those, but it's the most common type of brain
Mm-hmm.
disease that causes dementia. So I my first experience with it was like 50 years ago when my grandmother was diagnosed, and I would go
Mm-hmm.
visit her, and she would tell me about these birds that were living in her mattress. They would come out at night and peck at her face. She
Mm-hmm.
swore that men were trying to harm her. She
Mm-hmm.
claimed there were rats invading her home and that people were breaking into her house and stealing her jewelry. Now,
Wow.
I thought all of these tales she was telling me sounded pretty far-fetched, but I did
Mm-hmm.
not argue with her because she was my grandma and you didn't
Right.
argue with your elders.
Grandma. Sure didn't.
So one day I let her into to her bedroom. I said, "Grandma, come on, let's go check this out." And I lifted up her mattress and I said, "I'm not seeing any holes in your mattress. I'm not seeing where these birds are getting in and out." I said,
Mm-hmm.
show me." And her response was so brilliant. She says to me, "Oh, no, they are very clever." Well,
Mm.
this was the beginning of my journey into the world of Alzheimer's. And it was
Mm-hmm.
her 20-year journey with living with Alzheimer's. And then I ended up pursuing a career in this area because I saw what a devastating and heartbreaking disease it was and the
Right.
impact that it had on families, mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know what, OT, since then, I have had 8 total family members suffer from this disease.
Wow.
So I think this was definitely the path that I was meant to be on. So what I
Mm-hmm.
do is I help other families by educating them and raising awareness and teaching them how to communicate with people with dementia and how to react and respond to the unusual behaviors that show up as a result of the damage being done to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, hopefully it makes their lives a little less stressful, and then they can really get back to what matters, which is
Mm-hmm.
enjoying quality time with their loved one.
Right, right. So, I mean, that right there, you didn't already answer the first question I have, like, what inspired you to write the book? And right there, already just told me. That told me.
Yeah. Well, there is kind of an interesting story about what actually inspired me to write the book. You want me to
Okay.
tell?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, let's
So,
talk about it.
so before I wrote my first book, Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's is actually my second book. But before I
Mm-hmm.
wrote my first book, I had my own consulting firm.
Mm-hmm.
And I counseled families and helped them place their loved one in board and care homes or assisted living facilities. So I was called over to this one client's house. Her
Mm-hmm.
father had recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and
Mm-hmm.
her mother in law had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of got a double whammy. Both diagnoses happened about 2 years earlier. And she said, Lisa, I just need to get some information. I want to pick your brain. We are so frustrated. We don't know who to turn to. So I answered her questions for 2.5 hours. And she stops me after 2.5 hours and she says, I'm going to stop you for a second. She said, Lisa, I have to tell you, you have provided us with more information in the last 2.5 hours that you've been here that we've been able to get anywhere else in almost 2 years. And then she says to me, she says, you need to write a book. And
Mm-hmm.
follows that with, it would be very selfish of you not to share what you know, your expertise and your knowledge, because people are desperate for that information. And I had been
Yes.
thinking about it for years anyway. So after she said that, it's just struck a chord with me. I had heard it from other people. And that's when I really sat down and put the pen to paper and produced the book. It took me like a year and a half to do it, but I
Uh-huh.
did.
Well, listen, I mean, hey, that right there is very inspiring,
Thank
and
you.
just to hear someone say, "Hey, you should write a book," and you actually do it, that's another inspiring thing to do
Well,
because
I
you give
think
out
it was
some
the fact
information.
that she told me if I didn't, I'd be very selfish to not share.
Right. But let's talk about, you know, let's really dive deep into this because there is a lot of people that really don't know, about autism. Sorry about Alzheimer's, right? And there are people that are caregivers out there. What can you tell the caregivers? And the caregiver could be family members that are caring for their loved ones. What kind of information do these caregivers need to know about it?
I think that is probably the most important question anybody could ever ask me because, and I've been doing this for close to 30 years, helping
Mm-hmm.
families with this situation. Plus, I've witnessed it and experienced it in my own family. What I have learned over those decades is the key to unlocking the secrets of this very complicated disease and understanding what's happening to your loved one is understanding the damage that's being done to their brains and how it's having an impact on their cognitive abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So, as they're progressing through this disease, they lose their short term memory, but the long term memory stays intact. They're confused. They lose their ability to reason things out anymore and use judgments about things. And eventually, they rely pretty much exclusively on their emotions to react to things. So it kind of becomes that whole psychology, fight or flight, because they've
Mm-hmm.
lost their ability to use logic. That part of the brain stops working. And all these behaviors and responses and things that they do and say are reactions based on emotions, how that situation made them feel at that very moment. And it triggered an emotional response. So we start with that, understanding what's happening to their brains,
Mm-hmm.
why and where these behaviors and reactions are coming from. Like if they get agitated or they're scared or they feel uncomfortable. And they also lose their ability to articulate their wants and needs to you after a certain period of time as they
Mm-hmm.
progress through the disease. So they
Mm-hmm.
have to communicate in alternative ways. And
Mm-hmm.
those ways of communicating are showing up in the manifestation of behaviors, of being agitated, of being nervous, of being scared. And it's up to us as family members and caregivers to recognize these behaviors as their way of trying to communicate something really important to us. Maybe they're just cold. I mean,
Right.
you have to figure it out. But the more you know your loved one or the person you're caring for, you will learn to recognize and also figure out what triggered that behavior or that response. And then in addition to understanding, the second most important thing is to learn the special skills of communicating with somebody who can no longer communicate with you the way they used to.
Mm-hmm.
So think of it like a person losing their hearing. They
Mm-hmm.
can't hear a word you're saying. So you have to rely on other means to communicate with them. Maybe they got hearing aids, or maybe they you use sign language or lip reading. You will find another way to effectively communicate with that person in spite of their hearing deficit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no,
Um,
that's okay.
uh, and it's the same with people with Alzheimer's disease who lose their
Mm-hmm.
ability to communicate with you.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very effective way of communicating with them, but you have to learn it. Just like you have
Okay.
to learn the sign language, or you have
Right.
to learn, how to adapt to anybody's losses.
Mm-hmm.
But it's possible, and you can have. I've been watching people thrive for decades, and as long as people are prepared and they know what to do, they
Mm-hmm.
can achieve that success with their loved one, and it eliminates so much heartache and stress out of that relationship.
Well, you had said something that was very interesting. Um, during the course of our conversation was they tend to lose their short term memory, but their long term memory stays. Can you go a little bit deeper into that, because I think that's something key that people really need to understand.
You're exactly right, and it explains a lot of the behaviors we see from people who are suffering from dementia caused by one of the brain diseases like Alzheimer's disease. So my best analogy to explain this to people is think of your short-term memory as being hooked up to a switch, like a light
Okay.
switch that turns
Hmm.
a lamp on and off. In the very beginning stages of the disease, that switch is on more than it's off. So the short-term memory is functioning pretty normally with little blips from time to time.
Uh-huh.
As the person progresses into their mid stage of the disease, that switch is on sometimes and off sometimes. I'm going to come back to this in a second. Then, by the end stage of the disease, that switch is either completely shut off and they have zero short-term memory left,
Mm-hmm.
or it's off most of the time. When this happens, like we're going to go back to the mid stage and it's on sometimes and off sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
they start pulling from their long-term memories because the long-term memory stays intact for pretty much the duration of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
So think of it as a person, as their short-term memory, that switches off and it's
Mm-hmm.
diminishing. They're living their lives in reverse. They're going back to another period of time in their lives. And the
Mm-hmm.
best way to know whether that switch to their short-term memory is on or off is by listening to what they're talking about. If they're
Okay.
talking about something that makes absolutely no sense to you because it has to do with their period of life 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you'll know that switches off temporarily. And the
Mm-hmm.
best way to respond to that is to go along with them. We call it join their reality,
Mm-hmm.
because trust me on this, there's absolutely nothing anybody can do or say to steer them back into your reality. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to join theirs until that switch gets flipped back on. Now, eventually the switch will be off and they'll have no short-term memory. So just pay attention to what they're talking about, and you will be able to figure out kind of what period they've reverted back to in their lives. Some people I've seen revert all the way back to their childhood, and they're asking for their moms and their dads and where's my
Wow.
brother and my sister, and they start talking about the home they grew up in. Some I've seen are in the prime of their lives, they're housewives, they're mothers, they want to know where their children are. It's different for everybody, but you'll be able to figure it out based on the things that they're describing and talking about. When that switch does get turned back on, they will be back in the same reality that we live in, the ones of us who have healthy brains, and everything
Mm-hmm.
will seem like it's back to normal. So this is a really important part of understanding this disease, because I, unfortunately, and I've experienced it myself with my own family members, people get really, really upset and hurt when their loved one who is living with Alzheimer's disease doesn't recognize who they are anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the explanation for that, and I try to encourage people not to take it personally. It's hard not to, because it does hurt. But when that happens, it's because that short-term memory switch flipped off, and they don't recognize you as being part of their current life. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's because they think they're a teenager and they haven't even gotten married yet, let alone had children. They know
Wow.
they're connected to you somehow, but they can't quite put their fingers on what the relationship is. They
Mm-hmm.
recognize you,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't exist in their lifetime yet. So that's an example of what happens when that short-term memory malfunctions. But if they say, "Oh, I know you. You look very familiar," or they start calling you a different name, and maybe it's the name of a friend of theirs when they were a
Mm-hmm.
teenager,
Mm-hmm.
just ride with it, and hopefully it'll be temporary. It'll pass. That
Mm-hmm.
switch will go back on, especially if they're just in their mid stages, and things will seem back to normal. Just play along with it, because you cannot steer them back into your reality. It doesn't work that way. Their brains, the short-term memory is like it's just completely short-circuited for that time being, and they're
Mm-hmm.
living in a past time in their life. I think that is probably one of the most important things that people can understand about this disease, and then be prepared to respond to it effectively, so you don't create a more serious situation. We call them catastrophic reactions, where if you insist that you're not who they're claiming you are, it can just
Mm-hmm.
escalate into a really bad situation, and we don't want that. That's not a
Right.
good thing. It's not healthy for anybody.
So what are some of the common what are some of the common misconceptions that the general public has about Alzheimer's disease and other dementias?
That once you develop it, you might
Mm-hmm.
as well just kiss your life goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically a death sentence, and your life is over. And that's really the farthest thing from the truth. I have seen thousands of people thrive living with this disease if they're provided with an environment that helps them thrive. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And that's what Doug, my co-author, and I teach people. And they're provided with a put on a schedule and a
Mm-hmm.
routine, because when your brain is damaged, it's very important for people who live with it to have familiarity. Otherwise, they get scared and nervous, and it just creates stress for everybody. And it's so appropriate to bring this up for your show, because I have seen personally, and studies have been done, and there's a lot of information out there about how miraculous playing music is for people who live with dementia. And the reason why, it
Mm-hmm.
taps into people's long-term memory and brings all kinds of joy to their lives. There's a story in my book about this man who basically just completely stopped talking. He
Mm-hmm.
was taken to a concert at the
Mm-hmm.
place he was living, and he
Mm-hmm.
stood up after not talking for over a year and started singing along the words of Old Lang Syne
Wow.
when the musician played the song, because it was in
Uh-huh.
his long-term memory banks, and he had been a World War II vet.
Uh-huh.
And I have seen so many people, they can't remember what question they just asked you 3 seconds ago, but
Mm-hmm.
music taps into those long-term memories in this unbelievably magical way. And most people can remember every single word to their favorite songs when they were
Yeah.
younger. It's just
Yeah.
a mystery, but a magical mystery.
I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. So one of the things that I do want to ask you, because why does like the American society, tend to treat like autism as if it's like a family business, like Alzheimer's is like a family business. Like why do they do that?
Well, it's a very accurate statement. It is very, very true. I've been watching that for 50 years, since my grandmother was diagnosed and since I've been doing this professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And my best answer to that is fear of the unknown. People are afraid of what they don't understand.
Yeah.
There's also been, over the decades, so many stigmas attached to this disease.
Yes.
And my grandmother was called crazy. I've heard family members tell me, "Oh, my mom's just not the same. She's crazy now." No, this is not mental health. This is brain disease that's damaging the brain, and they're not crazy. They're living with a disease just like any other disease,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not treatable, but
Mm-hmm.
it's livable. And that's the big difference. So, because of the stigmas, because of the shame that a lot of family members feel, if
Mm-hmm.
people were to know that they have a family member that has some strange behaviors that come out, they don't want to expose other people to them. It's uncomfortable to go visit them, because most people don't understand how to effectively respond to those behaviors or the strange things they say. So this is what has created this false sense of fear in
Mm-hmm.
people. But I actually have noticed it start to change since, I would say, primarily in the last 2 years since COVID. And now it
Mm-hmm.
seems like everybody is starting to talk about it, and a lot more celebrities are coming forward and participating or supporting, like the Alzheimer's Association.
Yeah.
They're creating their own foundations over Alzheimer's disease. They're talking about their family members who are either living with the disease or have lived with it and already passed away. So I'm seeing a change in people's attitudes finally. And I think people are finally realizing that there's no shame in admitting or talking about Alzheimer's disease in your own family.
Mm-hmm.
And that now is helping people kind of come out of the closet about it and wanting to learn more and more and more as much as they can, so they can have a great relationship with that loved one.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your book a little bit, because your book talks about a lot of those things in the book, and what can people expect to read when they list what can people expect to read when they actually get your book? Like, what do you expect them to get out of it?
A lot of explanations about what's happening to their loved one as far as the damage to the brain and what to
Mm-hmm.
expect. Every single chapter illustrates some of these behaviors that I've been talking about that are commonly seen with
Mm-hmm.
this disease, and then the best approach to reacting and responding to that behavior, or the things they're talking about that don't make sense in our reality.
Right.
And there's a lot of resources in there too, like a, a glossary of terms that pertain specifically to Alzheimer's disease and living with dementia. There is a breakdown of kind of what to look for as somebody is going through the stages of the disease and some of the common signs and symptoms and behaviors. So you'll know what to look for, and you'll know how to recognize them. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll understand that all these things are part of the disease. So it's really an informative um, guide to help people understand this disease, and then kind of prepare your approaches according to these best practices. And it'll eliminate a lot of the stress that comes with having a family member suffering from Alzheimer's disease, or even, just going and visiting them if they're in a care home. And because I have had so many people tell me over the years, it is so uncomfortable. I don't know how to respond to this, half the things that come out of her mouth or his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And they behave very strangely. All of that is covered to help
Mm-hmm.
people um, enjoy a better relationship. This disease is not a short course. My
Mm-hmm.
grandmother lived with it for 20 years. The average
Wow.
is 8 to 15 years. That's a long time to try to have um, a, a good relationship with somebody that is just totally stressful all the time and
Mhm.
uncomfortable. So I
So,
help with all of that.
so can you give us like three examples of what people should watch for when uh when the early signs are coming?
Yeah, a lot of people actually are confused by that because, and the reason why, OT, is because in the very early stages of Alzheimer's disease or Lewy
Hmm.
body dementia or Parkinson's disease or one of the brain diseases that causes dementia, the signs, the symptoms are very, very subtle in the beginning. And
Okay.
almost impossible to differentiate between the normal aging process where
Mhm.
you just start forgetting things, you forget people's names. So where
Mhm.
did I put my keys? That's stuff that we've all experienced as we
Right.
get older.
Mhm.
There's a huge difference between normal aging and something more serious like Alzheimer's disease starting to
Mhm.
happen. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, those symptoms and the signs
Mhm.
and the behaviors don't really start to impact their lives until they're already into their mid stage, and
Right.
the signs become blatantly obvious.
Mhm.
So some of the things to look for that are very common when it is a red flag that something more serious is going on
Mhm.
is them repeating questions in the same conversation over and over and over again, or the same story in the same conversation, and they repeat it over and over and over again. They can't communicate the way they did. They're at a loss for words. They'll start talking to you and then can't find the right word to put in that sentence, or they use the wrong word, or they
Mhm.
make something up and call it, oh, you know what I'm talking about, that thingamajig. These are all signs of something more serious going on. Another thing to look for are tasks and habits that people have been doing for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden they have a really difficult time completing a task, or they stop in the middle of a task and don't know that they're supposed to, um, that there's more steps to it. They have
Mhm.
difficult time operating appliances that they've been operating for decades, like a coffee maker or an electric can opener, and they're just struggling with what is this thing and what does it do, and I don't remember how to work it. These are all strong signs that there's something seriously going on and that they're experiencing cognitive loss. One more example, I mentioned keys. I mean,
Mhm.
who of us have not forgotten where we put our keys and hunted all
Yeah.
over the place?
Yeah.
One of the big differences that you'll notice with somebody
Mhm.
who just experiencing normal aging forgetfulness and something more serious, they'll pick up the keys and they might say to you, what are these and what am I supposed to do with them? And they seriously do not know that you put the key in the door of your car to unlock it and then in the ignition to make it run. They just have no clue, and they're not faking it. They really cannot remember what the function of those car keys are. That's a serious sign of somebody that is possibly progressing into something very serious like an Alzheimer's disease.
Wow. Because I know especially these are things that our community don't really talk about because it's like you said, it's like it's shameful, it's family business, and a lot of people have all these misconceptions about it. And I'm glad that you came on here and started talking about it because we don't hear stuff like this. We don't really get into depth or really get into detail. Like, oh, well, they just forgetting. Let's just go ahead and throw them in the old folks' home. Like for real. Like that's something that we don't understand or we catch attitude. Oh, well, they don't understand me or they going crazy, like you said. And for you to talk about this and telling us a little bit of steps that we can do to like ease not just their disease, but to ease us too. I appreciate that because it's actually needed and it's something that we have to talk about because our families are getting old, right? Our elders are actually becoming elders. Like my father's 75 years old. You know what I mean? So there are things that I need to watch out for. You know what I mean? And for you to talk about these things, I appreciate it. So from me
That's a
to you,
really
I definitely
interesting
appreciate it.
point that you brought up because I think it's important to mention that by the year 2050, the number of people who will develop Alzheimer's disease worldwide is going to triple, and none of us are prepared.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
going to impact everybody. Everybody.
Yes. 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 Yes, it is. Wow. Mm. I'm silent right now because what you just said just really blew my mind. Like, it could be one of us as I'm sitting here having conversations with you when I start getting older.
Well,
You know what I mean?
statistically, right now, by the time we're all 80 years old, 1 in 3 of us will have it. 1 in 3. So, yeah, it's
Mm.
time to start these conversations and really start raising awareness about it, because it's going to come on like a tornado, and it's going to
Yeah.
come on like not in 100 years, in 20 years.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
appreciate you supporting my message in helping people understand and raise awareness, because I have literally seen this rip families apart, and it doesn't necessarily have to.
Right, right, right. Because you gave us a little bit of steps of what we need to do. Play music. Everyone loves their favorite music. Everyone knows their favorite tone. And I could tell you that that is absolutely true. Because I
Yes.
could sing something that I that I one of my favorite songs at the age of 13. Like, I know it. Right. So that's absolutely something true. But it's just for
Create a
us.
playlist. Create a playlist
Yes.
for your loved ones and play it for them. You'll see it calm them down. They'll probably start, singing the words. It's just fascinating how music triggers happy memories for people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you for coming on here talking to us about this. Especially Alzheimer's is something that we really need to get into because we hear dementia, we hear Parkinson's, but Alzheimer's we really barely hear a whole lot about it. If we do hear about it, is oh yeah, my mom or my father got it, and sometimes it's hard to have conversations with them, and just seeing the frustration or just hearing the frustration that they are having with their parents and not knowing the steps that they can take to make things better. I'm glad you came on here
Okay.
because you,
People can find out a lot of this information on our website, www.truthliesalzheimers.com. It's a great resource for y'all.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. And where else can they find you on social media? Can they find you on any social media
Oh,
platform?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about it.
All of them. LinkedIn. Oh, I've got a blog on Facebook
Hmm.
called Not All Who Wander Need Be Lost. Just search Lisa Skinner, and Amazon to find the book, or our website. So, but yeah, the website's a great resource because a lot of this information that we've talked about on the show today, you can get more details about and kind of, do a deeper dive into them. And we have a
Mm.
training course. We just released an audio book.
Okay.
So yeah, that just came out like a week and a half ago. So
See.
if you enjoy listening to audiobooks, there's one available now on Amazon and Audible.
Well, listen, I appreciate you, and let us know how we can support y'all too, because I do want to support your movement. I do want to support it 100%. So just I would get with your publicist for we can definitely talk about joining in and definitely
Oh,
helping out too,
oh,
because
that would be
it's
so wonderful. And
yes,
thank you
yes.
again for inviting me on. It's a true pleasure and an
Hey,
honor,
listen,
really.
listen. Thank you for coming on here and talking about it because a lot of people really need to know about it.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
and I'm glad that you're here to talk about it. And
Thank
I
you.
I, I appreciate you so much. So I'm gonna
Oh,
get with your publicist, Ruth. I'm gonna talk to Ruth, and so
okay.
we can all collaborate and talk about how can we partner up and support you and your movement and
Oh, that
the
would be
things that you're gonna be
so
doing.
awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
We
Yes,
need more
ma'am. And
people
that's
like you, OT.
well. Listen, thank you. 'Cause we need more people like you to spread the word.
Thank you.
So we appreciate you. So Ha. So once again, tell everybody where to find you at on all social media platforms and websites.
Website www.all truth lies Alzheimer's all one word .com.
There we go, y'all. There we go. Well, listen, I appreciate you once again. Welcome to the family. As we always say, you are now part of our family. So we
Oh,
appreciate you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll be talking to Ruth later on tonight to talk to
all
her about,
right.
you. Okay. Well, I appreciate you. And we will talk later.
Okay.
No doubt. I
Thanks, Sophie.
appreciate you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye. Good show, good show, good show, good show, y'all. Very good show. It's a blessing to have author Lisa Skinner here join us here on the show. We appreciate her so much. Listen, y'all, go out, get a book, go out, get a book. You can find all the information on all of our social media platforms. Everything on Facebook, Instagram. Make sure y'all follow her on all social media platforms. Support the cause, support of what she's doing because let me tell y'all something. It is real. What she said, it is real. And I know a lot of people that are living with it. We know people that are dealing with it. We know family members that are dealing with it. So let's give them support too. And make sure you go ahead and check out her book. If you don't like picking up the book and read it, like she said, her audio just came out, y'all. So you make sure you listen to that audio while you're driving in your car to get more insight and to find ways to help out, not just to ease your pain, but to ease theirs too. Because hey, they are loved no matter what. And at the end of the day, we gotta love them. We have to love them because they loved us. All right. So I love y'all. Y'all be good, and I will see y'all tomorrow, same time, same place. Ha. And like I always say, if someone asks you how you doing, you tell them you're doing better than yesterday. All right. I love y'all. Y'all be good, and I will be talking to y'all again tomorrow, 5:15. Love y'all. Be good, y'all. And